Equals the morning of June 10, 1940, broke over Paris with uneasy silence. Distant thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the guns approaching the northern front. The streets were strong with whispers, the air thick with rumors. The Germans were at the gates of the Somme. Samuel Rosen, a tailor from Rue Saint-Denis, stood by his shop window, watching Parisians swarm through the boulevards with suitcases and carts. Across the radio crackled the grim announcement: the government was leaving the capital. His wife Miriam turned to him and whispered, "We must go too, tonight." The city that had once been their home now felt like a trap. As dusk descended, church bells tolled faintly under the drone of distant aircraft. Samuel closed the door of his shop, the sign reading "Fermé," though he knew it would never open again. Paris trembled, and so did he, at the thought of what lay ahead.
At dawn, the Rosen family joined the human river flowing south through the Port d'Orléans. Cars, bicycles, and horse-drawn carts clogged the roads, mothers carrying infants, old men clutching family photos. Amid the chaos, Samuel led his wife Miriam and their 2 children, David, 12, and little Ruth, pushing a cart stacked with bread, blankets, and what little they could carry. Planes buzzed overhead, metallic shadows sliding across the fields. Once, near a tomb, they ducked into a roadside ditch as a formation of German Stukas screamed down upon retreating columns, the earth erupting in dust and panic. "Keep your head down," Samuel shouted, holding the children close. When silence returned, he looked up to see a horse lying motionless in the road, a reminder that even the innocent could not escape this madness. The journey had only just begun, yet the road already felt endless.
By mid-June, the news spread like wildfire. The German army had reached the Seine. Bridges were being blown to delay their advance. The rumble of explosions echoed through the hills. The Rosens, now near Chartres, paused by a roadside field. Miriam looked north, watching columns of black smoke rising into the blue. "Our Paris burns," she whispered. Nearby, refugees huddled around a single wireless, the voice of Marshal Pétain breaking through the static, urging calm, promising to protect the nation. But Samuel heard defeat in his tone. "There is no calm left," he murmured. The children slept on a blanket laid upon dry grass, faces smeared with dust. Around them, night fell heavy and still. The scent of diesel, burned bridges, and fear lingered in the air. For the first time, Samuel realized they were no longer just leaving Paris. They were leaving France as they had known it.
The exodus thickened into a river of despair, stretching across the Loire Valley. Every town was overflowing. Farmhouses became shelters for strangers. Near Orléans, the Rosens encountered a French column retreating under ragged tricolor flags, boots caked in mud. Soldiers with hollow eyes marched silently past, their weapons slung low. "Where will you go?" Miriam asked one of them. "Home, if such a thing still exists," he replied, before disappearing into the haze. The family's cart broke a wheel near Blois, forcing them to carry what they could. Hours turned into days beneath a pitiless sun. Ruth's small voice broke the monotony. "Mama, when will we see home again?" Miriam couldn't answer. Around them, the sound of hooves, engines, and wailing children formed a tragic symphony. France was dissolving, not in a single battle, but in the footsteps of millions.
On June 14th, the news came. Paris had fallen. The German flag now flew over the Eiffel Tower. The air itself seemed to shudder with disbelief. In a small village west of Bourges, the family stopped to rest near a church square, where villagers gathered around a priest reciting prayers for the fallen. The name of the capital was whispered in disbelief. Paris occupied. Miriam wept silently, clutching Ruth in her arms. Samuel stared toward the north, imagining his shuttered shop, the sewing machine gathering dust.
The war that had begun as something distant was now in their bones. "France will rise again," murmured an old farmer beside them, "but not today." As church bells tolled, Samuel exchanged glances with Miriam. Somewhere far away, soldiers were surrendering, and the world they had known was being written into history.
The Rosens found temporary refuge on a farm near Limoges. The farmer, Pierre Lemoyne, offered them a barn and bread in exchange for labor. Samuel repaired fences while Miriam stitched clothes for Pierre's family. For a moment, peace seemed possible, yet whispers of deportations and anti-Jewish decrees filtered through from the occupied zone. One evening, while repairing a torn shirt, Miriam overheard villagers discussing the new Statut des Juifs. Fear crept among them like smoke. "We must avoid the cities," Samuel told her. "South, toward Toulouse, perhaps across the border." The children laughed nearby, chasing fireflies in the twilight. For a fleeting second, the war felt far away. But behind each shadowed field, the darkness of occupation grew closer. In that fragile calm, hope was their most dangerous possession. By late June, France was divided, the occupied zone in the north and the so-called free zone under Marshal Pétain in the south. The Rosens joined other refugees moving toward the demarcation line near Moulins. French guards checked papers, eyes weary and cautious. "You'll need a pass," one officer muttered, glancing at Samuel's documents. They waited in long queues under a sky thick with dust and fear. Nearby, a woman fainted, clutching a child, as German patrols appeared on the horizon. When night fell, a sympathetic officer whispered, "The bridge at Saint-Menehould is less guarded. Go quickly." They crossed in silence under the moonlight, the Loire glinting below like liquid steel. On the far side, Miriam exhaled, trembling. For now, they were in Vichy, France. The illusion of safety, fragile as glass, held for only a moment.
In Toulouse, life carried on as though the war were a rumor. Cafes still served coffee made from chicory. Trams clattered over cobblestones. The Rosens rented a cramped room under a red-tiled roof, blending into the sea of displaced souls. Samuel found occasional work mending uniforms for local police, while Miriam volunteered at a soup kitchen run by nuns. Yet fear was an unseen lodger. Vichy decrees grew harsher. Jews now required registration. "Perhaps it will pass," Miriam said softly, but she didn't believe it. At night, the sound of church bells mixed with distant trains heading east, and Samuel couldn't shake the dread that those trains would one day carry people, not soldiers. Still, the family clung to each dawn, each meal, each small laughter as a victory against despair.
1941 brought whispers of defiance. Samuel met a young man named Henri from the local resistance. "There are safe routes to Spain," Henri said quietly in the back of the tailor shop. Leaflets circulated, scribbled with the word Liberté. The Rosens debated night after night. Should they risk everything again? "I will not raise our children in fear," Miriam said firmly. Plans were made, forged papers, a guide in Perpignan, a crossing through the Pyrenees. Each day grew heavier with risk as informers prowled and curfews tightened. The hum of Allied radio from London offered flickers of hope. David began sketching airplanes in his notebook, dreaming of wings. Samuel knew that the time to move once more was near, that survival would mean becoming shadows in their own land.
Under a sky streaked with autumn mist, the Rosens set out once more, toward the border, guided by hope and exhaustion. Somewhere beyond the Pyrenees lay Spain and freedom. Behind them, France was broken, yet still beautiful in defiance. On a hillside overlooking the plains, Samuel paused to look back.
He saw not the ruins of a nation, but the strength of those who refuse to surrender their humanity. "Whatever happens," Miriam whispered, "we are still together." In that moment, even the war seemed to soften, if only for a breath. The path ahead was steep, uncertain, but filled with promise. The exodus that began in fear ended here in faith, proof that even in humanity's darkest hour, the will to survive could outshine the fire of war.